Some children learn too early that the world can be cruel beyond measure. 7-year-old Lila knew this truth better than most, standing alone at a farmhouse door with nothing but hunger and hope. Her grandmother had passed 3 days ago, and now Lila faced the world by herself. The nun who opened the door wore simple blue robes, her kind face lined with years of caring for others. A blind boy sat nearby on the porch steps. "If I make your blind son see, will you feed me?" Lila asked. Simply, Sister Catherine laughed first, then began to cry. She had run this small farm for 30 years, caring for children nobody else wanted. She had prayed countless times for miracles that never came. Now this small girl stood before her, speaking of impossible things with quiet certainty. The child had lost everything, yet still believed in miracles. Could such faith really change what medicine and prayer could not? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sister Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her weathered hand and stepped aside, gesturing for the small girl to enter. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of yesterday's bread and this morning's coffee. Simple scents that spoke of a life, measured in daily necessities rather than grand ambitions. "What's your name, child?" Sister Catherine asked, her voice still thick with emotion. "Lila Mae Johnson," the girl replied, clutching a small cloth bundle to her chest. "My grandmother called me her little light." The kitchen was warm despite the October chill outside, heated by an old wood stove that had served Sacred Heart Farm for longer than Sister Catherine could remember. Mismatched chairs surrounded a scarred wooden table, and sunlight filtered through gingham curtains that had seen better days. Everything in the room spoke of careful preservation, of making do with what they had. Sister Catherine studied the child before her. Lila was thin, too thin, but her eyes held a clarity that seemed older than her years. Her dress was clean, but patched in several places, and her shoes were worn nearly through at the soles. Yet she carried herself with a dignity that made Sister Catherine's heart ache with recognition. She had seen that look before, in other children who had learned too early to rely only on themselves. "Where did you come from, Lila Mae?" Sister Catherine asked gently, pulling out a chair at the table. "Where is your family?" Lila sat carefully, as if unused to being invited to take up space. "Grandmother's buried in the colored cemetery back, in Millbrook. Been walking since then. The church ladies said there wasn't room for me nowhere else." The simple statement hit Sister Catherine like a physical blow. 3 days walking alone, a 7-year-old child navigating the world without a soul to care for her. She thought of her own comfortable bed, the regular meals, the roof that never leaked, and felt ashamed of every moment she had ever complained about their circumstances. "And you walked all the way here?" Sister Catherine asked. "Followed the road signs. Can read pretty good. Grandmother taught me." Lila's voice carried pride despite her obvious exhaustion. "She said if I ever needed help, to look for people who served the Lord. Saw your cross on the gate." Through the kitchen window, Sister Catherine could see that cross now, a simple wooden structure that marked the entrance to their property. Sacred Heart Farm stretched across 47 acres of gently rolling hills, though only a portion remained actively farmed these days. The vegetable gardens still produced enough to feed their small household, and they kept chickens for eggs, a few goats for milk, and an old milk cow named Bessie, who had been with them for nearly a decade. The farm had been thriving once, back, when the community of sisters numbered 12, and they took in as many children as they could house. But times had changed. Now only Sister Catherine and Sister Margaret remained, caring for 4 children in a house that had once sheltered 20. The other buildings, the old dormitory, the workshop, the expanded chapel, stood mostly empty, serving as reminders of what had been. "Sister Margaret," Sister Catherine called toward the back of the house. "Could you come here, please?" Footsteps approached, measured and careful. Sister Margaret appeared in the doorway, a woman of 72 whose silver hair was always perfectly arranged beneath her simple veil. Where Sister Catherine's face showed every emotion, Sister Margaret had learned to school her features into careful neutrality. She took in the scene, the strange child at their table, Sister Catherine's red-rimmed eyes, and her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Another one?" Sister Margaret asked, though not unkindly. "This is Lila May," Sister Catherine said. "She's had a difficult journey." Sister Margaret's expression softened slightly as she looked at the child. Despite her practical nature, she had never been able to remain unmoved by genuine need. "Well then, I suppose you're hungry." It wasn't really a question. Lila nodded, and Sister Margaret moved to the stove with the efficiency of someone who had been feeding people for more than 40 years. Soon, the kitchen filled with the sound of eggs crackling in a cast-iron pan and the warmth of fresh biscuits heating in the oven. "The boy on the porch," Lila said suddenly. "Is he yours?" Sister Catherine exchanged a glance with Sister Margaret. "Micah belongs to all of us here," she said carefully. "We're his family now, just as we're family to Emma and Tommy." "But he, can't see?" "No," Sister Catherine confirmed. "Micah was born without sight, but he manages quite well. He knows this farm better than most people know their own homes." Lila absorbed this information with the serious consideration of a child who had learned to evaluate each new situation for potential threats or opportunities. "How long has he been here?" 3 years now," Sister Margaret said, sliding a plate of eggs and a warm biscuit in front of Lila. "His mother couldn't care for him properly. She brought him to us when he was 5. Lila ate carefully, taking small bites as if afraid the food might disappear. Between mouthfuls, she continued her questioning. "Where are the other children?" "Emma's in the garden with the chickens," Sister Catherine said. "She's 6, about your age. She loves taking care of the animals. Tommy's 9. He's helping Micah with the afternoon chores." "What kind of chores can a blind boy do?" Sister Margaret bristled slightly at the question, but Sister Catherine placed a gentle hand on her arm. Children asked direct questions. It was their nature to try to understand the world around them. "Micah can do almost anything," Sister Catherine explained. "He feeds the animals, helps with the washing, even assists in the kitchen. His other senses are remarkably sharp. Sometimes I think he notices things the rest of us miss entirely." Lila finished her eggs and regarded the two women with those clear, serious eyes. "My grandmother always said the Lord gave everyone gifts, but sometimes people can't see them right away." "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman," Sister Catherine said. "She was." Lila's voice grew quiet. "She could heal folks. Not like a doctor, but she had a touch. People came from 3 counties over when they heard she could help." The child paused, then looked directly at Sister Catherine. "She taught me some things before she passed." The kitchen fell silent, except for the gentle ticking of the mantel clock and the distant sound of children's voices from somewhere outside. Sister Margaret and Sister Catherine exchanged another look, this one filled with unspoken questions and concerns. "What kind of things?" Sister Catherine asked gently. "How to see what's really wrong with people, how to help them find what they lost." Lila's small hands fidgeted with the edge of her cloth bundle. "Grandmother said I had the gift too, but it needed time to grow." Before either sister could respond, the kitchen door opened and 3 children tumbled inside, bringing with them the smell of autumn air and the particular energy that children carry when they've been working together outdoors. Micah entered first, his hand trailing along the familiar doorframe, followed by Emma, a small girl with strawberry blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and Tommy, a boy whose dark hair and wary expression suggested he had learned to be suspicious of new situations. "Sister Catherine," Micah said, "we finished cleaning the chicken coop, and Emma collected 14 eggs today. That's 2 more than yesterday." His voice was clear and confident, and he moved through the kitchen with the assurance of someone intimately familiar with every corner and obstacle. Lila watched him with intense interest, noting how he used sound and touch to navigate, how his fingers briefly contacted the table's edge as he passed. "That's wonderful, Micah," Sister Catherine said. "We have someone new I'd like you all to meet. This is Lila May. She'll be staying with us for a while." Emma stepped slightly behind Tommy, who regarded Lila with the wariness of a child who had learned that new arrivals often meant change, and change was rarely good. Micah, however, turned toward Lila with genuine curiosity. "Hello, Lila May," he said. "How old are you?" "7, Lila replied. "How old are you?" "8. Have you ever lived on a farm before?" "No, I lived in town with my grandmother." Micah nodded thoughtfully. "It's different here, quieter at night, but there are more sounds during the day. Birds and animals and wind through the trees. You'll learn to recognize them all." Lila studied his face, noting the way his sightless eyes seemed to focus just past her left shoulder, the easy confidence in his voice, the obvious affection the 2 nuns had for him. An idea was beginning to form in her mind, something her grandmother had taught her about seeing beyond what was obvious to everyone else. "Maybe you could show me around tomorrow," she asked. Micah's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I'd like that. I know all the best places." As the afternoon wore on, Sister Catherine showed Lila to a small room on the 2nd floor. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a wooden dresser, and a window that looked out over the farm's vegetable gardens. Clean sheets and a worn but serviceable quilt waited on the bed, and someone had placed a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers on the dresser. "Emma picked those for you," Sister Catherine said, noticing Lila's gaze. "She doesn't speak much to new people, but flowers are her way of saying welcome." Lila carefully placed her cloth bundle on the dresser and unwrapped it, revealing its contents, a small, leather-bound Bible with pages soft from countless readings, a carved wooden angel no bigger than her thumb, and a folded piece of paper covered in careful handwriting. "What's that?" Sister Catherine asked gently. "Grandmother's healing recipes," Lila said, touching the paper reverently. "She wrote them down for me before she got too sick to remember them all." Sister Catherine felt something shift in her chest, a mixture of hope and concern that she couldn't quite name. "Lila May, I want you to understand something important. Micah's blindness isn't something that can be healed with medicines or salves. The doctors have examined him thoroughly. His condition is permanent." Lila looked at her with those impossibly clear eyes. "Maybe the doctors don't know everything," she said simply. That evening, as Sister Catherine sat in the small chapel that adjoined the farmhouse, she found herself praying more fervently than she had in months. The chapel was humble. Just 6 wooden pews facing a simple altar, adorned with a wooden cross and a small statue of the Sacred Heart. Above it all hung the farm's old bell, a bronze instrument that had once called the community to prayer 3 times daily. It had been silent for nearly 2 years now, cracked during a fierce storm and never repaired. As she knelt before the altar, Sister Catherine found herself thinking about faith, not the abstract theological concept she had studied in seminary, but the lived reality of belief in the face of daily struggle. They were barely keeping the farm operational. Each month brought new concerns about finances, about their aging bodies, about the future of the children in their care. And now, this child had arrived, speaking of miracles with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who had seen them happen. Part of Sister Catherine wanted to dismiss Lila's claims as the fantasies of a grieving child. But another part, the part that had brought her to religious life in the first place, wondered if perhaps faith sometimes arrived in the most unexpected packages. Through the chapel's single window, she could see the farmhouse glowing warmly in the evening darkness. Inside, 4 children were settling down for the night, including one who had arrived that morning with nothing but hope and a grandmother's recipes for healing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and perhaps new possibilities. Sister Catherine closed her eyes and prayed for wisdom, for guidance, and for the grace to recognize miracles when they came, whatever form they might take. Dawn broke grey and misty over Sacred Heart Farm, the kind of October morning that promised warmth later but began with a chill that made everyone reach for sweaters. Lila woke to unfamiliar sounds, roosters crowing, the lowing of cattle, and footsteps moving purposefully through the house below. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by the absence of city noises, then remembered where she was and why. She dressed quickly in her one other outfit, a blue dress that had been her grandmother's when she was young, and made her way downstairs, into the kitchen. Sister Margaret was already there, moving efficiently between the stove and the counter, preparing breakfast for 5 people with the practiced ease of decades. "Good morning, Lila May," Sister Margaret said without turning around. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am, thank you." Lila hesitated in the doorway. "Can I help with anything?" Sister Margaret glanced over her shoulder, taking in the child's obvious eagerness to be useful. "Can you set the table? Dishes are in that cabinet there, silverware in the drawer below." As Lila worked, the other children began filtering into the kitchen. Emma appeared first, moving quietly as always, her strawberry blonde hair neatly braided. She gave Lila a shy smile and helped arrange the silverware more precisely. Tommy came next, his hair sticking up in the back and his expression wary as he watched Lila navigate the kitchen. Micah arrived last, his hand trailing along the wall. Until he reached the familiar territory of the kitchen, he moved with confidence, but Lila noticed how carefully he placed each step, how his fingers briefly contacted surfaces to maintain his orientation. "Morning, everyone," he said cheerfully. "Lila May, did the roosters wake you up? They take some getting used to." "I like the sound," Lila replied honestly. "It's different from the city." After breakfast, Sister Catherine suggested that Micah show Lila around the farm as promised. The morning air was crisp but pleasant as they stepped outside, and Lila found herself taking deeper breaths than she had in days. The farm spread out before them in a way that seemed both organized and natural. Vegetable gardens gave way to pasture land, which rolled toward a small grove of oak trees that marked the property's eastern boundary. "The chicken coop is over there," Micah said, pointing in precisely the right direction. "We have 23 hens and one very proud rooster named Napoleon. He thinks he runs the place." Lila watched Micah's face as he spoke, noting the way his expression brightened when he talked about the animals. "How do you know exactly where everything is?" "I count steps, mostly, and I listen. Each building sounds different when you get close to it. The chicken coop has a particular sound, all that scratching and clucking. The barn where we keep Bessie is quieter, but it smells like hay and milk." Micah paused, tilting his head slightly. "And I can tell where I am by the way the ground feels under my feet. The path to the chickens is packed dirt. The way to the barn is gravel." They walked toward the chicken coop, Micah leading confidently, while Lila observed everything with intense interest. The chickens were indeed vocal, creating a constant background chatter as they pecked at the ground and fluffed their feathers in the morning sun. "Napoleon!" Micah called, and a magnificent red rooster came strutting toward them, his chest puffed out with importance. "This is Lila May. She's going to be living here with us." Lila stared as the rooster actually seemed to consider this information, cocking his head and regarding her with one bright eye. "Does he really understand you?" "I think so," Micah said seriously. "Animals are good at understanding things people miss. They don't need words for everything." As they continued their tour, Lila found herself studying Micah more intently. She watched how he used his other senses to navigate the world, how his face turned towards sounds with precise accuracy, how his fingers could identify objects with just a brief touch. But more than that, she noticed something her grandmother had taught her to see: the way people carried themselves, the energy that surrounded them, the signs that told her more than words ever could. "Micah," she said suddenly, "can you tell me what you remember about seeing? From before you were born, I mean." Micah stopped walking and turned toward her voice. "I don't remember seeing anything. I was born this way. The sisters told me my eyes never developed properly inside my mother." "But do you dream about seeing, or wonder what colors look like?" The question seemed to surprise him. Most people, Lila realized, probably avoided asking such direct questions. "Sometimes I dream about light," he admitted. "Warm feelings that I think might be what sunlight looks like, and I imagine colors based on how things feel or sound. Red must be warm and strong, like Napoleon's crow. Blue must be cool and peaceful, like the sound of rain on the roof." They had reached the pasture where Bessie grazed contentedly, her black and white coat gleaming in the strengthening sunlight. Micah called to her, and the cow ambled over to the fence, clearly expecting attention. "She likes having her forehead scratched," Micah explained, demonstrating. "Right between her eyes, where there's a white patch shaped like a star." Lila reached out tentatively and touched the cow's forehead. Bessie leaned into the contact, clearly enjoying it. But as Lila's small hand rested on the animal's head, she felt something. A warmth, a connection, a sense of the cow's contentment and trust. "Micah," she said quietly, "do you think some people can see things that aren't exactly there, like see what could be instead of just what is?" Micah considered this seriously. "My grandmother, not the sisters, but my real grandmother, who I lived with before I came here, she used to say that some people could see past the surface of things. She said it was a gift, but also a responsibility." Lila felt her heart quicken. What kind of responsibility? To help people find what they'd lost? Or to help them see what they already had but couldn't recognize? Micah's voice grew thoughtful. "She said the best kind of healing wasn't fixing what was broken, but helping people understand that they weren't broken in the first place." They spent the next hour exploring the farm together. Micah showed her the workshop, where they repaired tools and built simple furniture, the root cellar where vegetables were stored for winter, and the small orchard where apple trees were heavy with late-season fruit. With each stop, Lila found herself more convinced that her initial instinct had been correct. She had been sent here for a reason. That afternoon, as they sat on the porch steps sharing an apple from the orchard, Lila made her decision. "Micah, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right. If someone told you they thought they could help you see, not with medicine or surgery, but with something different, would you want them to try?" Micah was quiet for a long moment, his face serious. "People have tried to help me before," he said finally. "Doctors and specialists, and even a faith healer who came through town once. It never worked, and it always made the sisters sad when nothing changed. But what if it wasn't about making your eyes work differently? What if it was about helping you see in a way you've never tried before?" "I don't understand." Lila took a deep breath. "My grandmother taught me that there are different kinds of sight. Some people see with their eyes, but other people see with their hearts, or their spirits, or their understanding. She said the most important kind of seeing was recognizing the connections between all living things." Micah turned toward her voice, his expression intent. "And you think you could help me with that kind of seeing?" "I think maybe we could help each other," Lila said carefully. "My grandmother always said healing was a partnership. The person with the gift and the person who needs healing have to work together." "What would we have to do?" Lila thought about her grandmother's methods, the gentle touch, the quiet conversations, the way she helped people understand what was already inside them, waiting to be discovered. "We'd spend time together. I'd teach you some things my grandmother taught me, and you'd teach me about how you experience the world. We'd practice paying attention to things most people ignore, and you really think this could help me see? I think it could help you see better than you already do, Lila said honestly, and maybe it could help other people see you better too. Micah was quiet for so long that Lila began to worry she had overstepped. But when he spoke, his voice was filled with cautious hope. When would we start? Tomorrow morning, Lila said, right after breakfast. We'll begin with something simple. That evening, as the household settled into its routine, Lila sat on her bed with her grandmother's Bible open on her lap. The familiar words brought comfort, but she found herself thinking more about the conversations she'd had that day than about the verses she was reading. She had made a promise to Micah, and she intended to keep it. But as she thought about what lay ahead, she realized she was also making a promise to herself, to honor her grandmother's memory by using the gift she'd been given to help others find their own inner light. In the room next to hers, she could hear Micah moving around, preparing for bed. Tomorrow would be the first day of their work together. Tomorrow, she would begin to fulfill the promise she'd made on the front porch steps. Not the promise about miraculous healing, but the more important promise about helping someone see the truth of who they really were. Outside her window, the farm settled into evening quiet, and Lila fell asleep to the sound of night birds calling to each other across the fields, already planning the lessons she would share with her new friend. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. Lila woke early, her mind already focused on the day ahead. She had spent much of the night thinking about her grandmother's teachings, trying to remember the specific techniques and approaches that had made her healing work so effective. After breakfast, she found Micah on the front porch, waiting for her as promised. He had brought with him a small wooden horse, carved with remarkable detail, despite being the work of someone who had never seen the animal he was depicting. "Did you make that?" Lila asked, settling beside him on the steps. "Last winter," Micah replied, running his fingers over the smooth wood. "Sister Margaret taught me to carve. She said working with my hands would help me understand shapes and textures better." Lila examined the horse carefully. It was beautiful work. The proportions were perfect. The mane carved in flowing lines that suggested movement even in the still wood. Most remarkably, the horse seemed to have an expression of gentle intelligence, as if Micah had somehow captured not just the animal's physical form, but its spirit. "This is amazing," she said honestly. "It's better than anything I've ever seen." "In store windows." Micah's face brightened with pleasure. "Really? Sometimes I wonder if what I'm making looks the way I think it does." "It looks exactly right," Lila assured him, "and that tells me something important about the way you see the world." She set the wooden horse carefully on the porch railing and turned to face Micah directly. "My grandmother always started her healing work by teaching people to pay attention to things they usually ignored. She said most folks walk through the world half asleep, missing all the important information their senses are trying to give them." "What kind of information?" "Well, you already know some of it," Lila said. "You told me yesterday that you can identify places by the way they sound and smell." That's exactly what she meant. "But there's more. Things like the way the air feels before rain, or how different people's voices change when they're happy or worried or trying to hide something." Micah nodded thoughtfully. "I do notice things like that. People think I can't, and tell when they're upset, but voices carry all kinds of feelings." "That's because you're already practicing a kind of seeing that most people never learn," Lila explained. "My grandmother called it seeing with the whole self, using every sense you have, plus intuition and understanding, to perceive what's really happening around you." They spent the next hour walking around the farm, while Lila encouraged Micah, to describe everything he was experiencing. As they approached the chicken coop, she asked him to tell her not just what he heard, but what the sounds meant. "Napoleon's crow is different this morning," Micah said, pausing to listen. "It's sharper, more urgent, and I can hear some of the hens making distressed sounds." "What do you think that means?" Micah tilted his head, concentrating. "Something's wrong. Maybe a predator nearby, or one of the chickens is hurt." They hurried to the coop and found exactly what Micah had predicted. A red fox had been trying to dig under the fence during the night, and several of the hens were agitated by the evidence of the attempted intrusion. Sister Margaret appeared, carrying a basket for collecting eggs, and was amazed to learn that Micah had diagnosed the problem simply by listening. "How did you know?" she asked. "Lila's teaching me to pay attention to things I already notice, but—" "Don't think about," Micah explained. Sister Margaret looked at Lila with new interest. "And what else are you teaching him?" "That he already sees more than most people," Lila replied. "I'm just helping him recognize it." Throughout the morning, they continued their exercises. Lila taught Micah to identify different types of birds by their calls, to predict weather changes by the way the air pressure felt against his skin, and to distinguish between the footsteps of different people by their rhythm and weight. With each successful identification, Micah's confidence grew visibly, but it was during their afternoon session that something truly remarkable happened. They were sitting in the apple orchard, practicing what Lila called deep listening, sitting perfectly still and identifying every sound within their hearing. Micah had become remarkably good at this, cataloging everything from the rustle of leaves to the distant sound of Bessie moving through her pasture. "Now try something different," Lila suggested. "Don't just listen to the sounds. Try to feel the spaces between them." "I don't understand." "Close your eyes. Well, focus inward the way you do when you're carving. Feel the shape of the silence around the sounds. My grandmother said that's where the most important information lives." Micah went very still, his breathing slow and steady. For several minutes, neither child spoke. Then Micah's head turned sharply toward the house. "Emma's crying," he said suddenly. Lila listened, but heard nothing unusual. "Are you sure?" "She's in the kitchen with Sister Catherine. She's trying to—" "Be quiet about it, but she's definitely crying." They hurried back to the house and found exactly what Micah had sensed. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, with tears streaming down her face, while Sister Catherine knelt beside her chair, trying to comfort her. On the table was a broken ceramic figurine, a small angel that Emma had treasured. "Oh, sweetheart," Sister Catherine was saying. "It was an accident. Tommy didn't mean to knock it over." Emma looked up as Micah and Lila entered, her blue eyes swimming with tears. She rarely spoke, but her distress was obvious. Micah immediately moved to her side. "It's the angel your mother gave you, isn't it?" he said gently. Emma nodded, unable to speak. Lila examined the broken figurine. It had shattered into several pieces, but they were clean breaks. "May I try something?" she asked Sister Catherine. With permission, Lila carefully gathered the pieces and carried them to the workshop, followed by the others. She found some wood glue and began the delicate process of reassembling the angel. Her small fingers worked with surprising dexterity, fitting each piece precisely into place. "How do you know how to do that?" Sister Catherine asked. "Grandmother taught me that broken things usually want to be whole again," Lila replied, concentrating on her work. "You just have to be patient and gentle, and pay attention to how the pieces fit together." When she finished, the angel was intact. Again, there were thin lines marking where it had been broken, but somehow these seemed to add to its beauty rather than detract from it. "It's like it has scars that tell a story," Micah observed, running his fingers lightly over the repaired surface. Emma's face transformed with joy. She hugged the angel to her chest. then surprised everyone by speaking clearly for the first time since Lila's arrival. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, Sister Catherine found herself examining a small leather journal she kept locked in her desk drawer. It contained detailed medical records of each child in their care, including every diagnosis, treatment, and professional opinion they had received. Micah's file was particularly thick, filled with reports from ophthalmologists, neurologists, and specialists who had all reached the same conclusion. His blindness was permanent and complete. Yet today, she had watched him predict problems with the chickens, sense Emma's distress from across the farm, and demonstrate an awareness of his surroundings that seemed to transcend ordinary sensory perception. She had also watched Lila repair something that seemed irreparably broken, using not just glue and patience, but an intuitive understanding of how things should fit together. As she closed the journal and prepared for evening prayers, Sister Catherine found herself wondering whether healing might sometimes come in forms that medical science couldn't measure or explain. Perhaps some gifts operated according to different laws entirely, laws that had more to do with connection and understanding than with the restoration of physical function. In the chapel, she knelt before the silent bell and prayed for wisdom, for guidance, and for the grace to recognize truth when it appeared in unexpected forms. A week had passed since Lila's arrival at Sacred Heart Farm, and the rhythm of daily life had shifted to accommodate her presence in ways both subtle and profound. Each morning after breakfast, she and Micah would spend 2 hours together, working on what Lila called awareness exercises, activities designed to sharpen perception and deepen understanding of the world around them. The change in Micah was remarkable. He moved through the farm with increased confidence, his posture straighter, his steps more assured. More importantly, he had begun to notice and respond to subtle environmental cues that he had previously ignored. When storms approached, he could predict them hours before the sky grew dark. He could identify individual chickens by the sound of their movements and had even begun helping Sister Margaret diagnose minor health issues in the animals. By recognizing changes in their behavior patterns, Emma, too, had begun to emerge from her shell. Since the incident with the broken angel, she had started speaking more frequently, though still only to the family at Sacred Heart Farm. More significantly, she had begun drawing again, something she hadn't done since arriving at the farm 6 months earlier. Her latest creation was a detailed sketch of Lila and Micah sitting together under the oak tree at the far end of the property, their heads bent toward each other in conversation. The drawing captured something essential about their friendship, the way Lila listened with her whole body when Micah spoke, the way Micah's face brightened whenever he heard her voice. Emma had somehow managed to convey the invisible bond between them using nothing but pencil lines on paper. "This is beautiful, Emma," Sister Catherine said, examining the drawing during their afternoon art time. "You've captured something very special about their friendship." Emma nodded seriously. "They see each other," she said simply. It was perhaps the most profound observation anyone had made about what was happening between Lila and Micah. They did see each other, not in the conventional sense, but in the deeper way that mattered most. Lila saw Micah's intelligence, his sensitivity, his remarkable ability to navigate the world through senses other than sight. Micah saw Lila's kindness, her wisdom beyond her years, and the gentle way she helped others recognize their own capabilities. Tommy had been slower to warm up to Lila, maintaining the suspicious distance that had served him well in previous placements. At 9, he was old enough to remember several failed living situations, and he had learned to be wary of new arrivals who might disrupt the fragile stability he had found at Sacred Heart Farm. But gradually, even Tommy began to soften. It started when he noticed Lila quietly helping with chores that were particularly difficult for him, tasks requiring fine motor skills that he had always struggled with. She never offered to take over or made him feel inadequate. Instead, she would work alongside him, her presence somehow making the work easier and more enjoyable. One afternoon, while they were braiding rope for the barn repairs, Tommy finally voiced what had been troubling him. "You're not really going to heal Micah's eyes, are you?" he asked bluntly. Lila paused in her work, considering how to answer. "What do you think healing means?" "Making things work the way they're supposed to. Fixing what's broken." "And you think Micah is broken?" Tommy frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Not broken exactly, but he can't see. That's not normal. My grandmother used to say that normal was just another word for what most people are used to," Lila replied, continuing to braid the rope with steady movements. She said the most important kind of healing was helping people understand that they were already complete, that what made them different might actually be what made them special. But wouldn't Micah be happier if he could see like everyone else? Lila thought about this carefully. "I don't know. Would you be happier if you were exactly like everyone else?" Tommy considered this. "Maybe. Sometimes. But then you wouldn't be Tommy anymore. You'd be someone else who happened to look like Tommy." The conversation continued as they worked, and gradually Tommy began to understand what Lila was really trying to accomplish. She wasn't attempting to change Micah into someone different. She was helping him become more fully himself, more confident, more aware, more connected to the world around him. Sister Margaret had been watching these developments with a mixture of fascination and concern. As the more practical of the two nuns, she appreciated the obvious improvements in all the children's behavior and capabilities, but she worried about the expectations that were building around Lila's presence. "People in town are starting to talk," she confided to Sister Catherine one evening as they prepared dinner. "Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store asked me 3 times this week about our miracle child. She wants to know if it's true that Lila can heal the sick." Sister Catherine sighed, stirring the pot of soup with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "What did you tell her?" "That Lila is a 7-year-old girl who has brought joy and wisdom to our household, but she's not performing medical miracles." Sister Margaret paused. "Though I have to admit, watching her work with the children makes me wonder if there aren't different kinds of miracles than the ones we usually think about." Their conversation was interrupted by laughter from the living room, where all 4 children were gathered around Emma's sketchbook. She had been drawing portraits of each of them, and the results were surprisingly sophisticated for a 6-year-old's work. "Look at this one of Sister Catherine," Micah was saying, his fingers tracing the lines of the drawing Emma held up for him. "You can feel how kind her eyes are, even in pencil marks." "How can you tell?" Lila asked, genuinely curious. "The way Emma drew the lines around her eyes. They're soft, with little crinkles at the corners, and the mouth curves up slightly, even when it's not exactly smiling. It feels like someone who thinks good thoughts about other people." Emma beamed with pride at having her artistic choices understood so completely. She flipped to another page and showed them a drawing of the 4 children working together in the garden, each figure engaged in a different task, but clearly part of a unified effort. "We look like a real family," Tommy observed, and there was something wistful in his voice. "We are a real family," Lila said firmly. "Families aren't just about sharing blood, they're about sharing care." That evening, Lila sat on her bed with her grandmother's recipe paper spread before her, studying the careful handwriting by lamplight. Most of the remedies were simple folk medicine. Herb teas for stomach troubles, poultices for cuts and bruises, salves for dry skin. But scattered among the practical instructions were notes about what her grandmother called the healing touch, techniques for helping people find peace within themselves, methods for encouraging the body's natural ability to restore balance and health. One passage in particular caught her attention. "Remember, child, that the greatest healing happens when people learn to see themselves as the Creator sees them, whole, beloved, and perfectly designed for their purpose in this world. Sometimes what appears to be limitation is actually invitation, an opportunity to develop gifts that others never discover." As she read these words, Lila thought about Micah's remarkable sensitivity to sound and touch, Tommy's fierce loyalty once his trust was earned, Emma's ability to capture emotional truth in her drawings, and even her own developing understanding of how to help others recognize their inner strengths. Perhaps her grandmother had been preparing her for exactly this situation, not to perform dramatic healings that would astound skeptics, but to help a small group of forgotten children understand that they were already complete, already valuable, already loved. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dr. Harrison, who had examined Micah during his first year at the farm, arrived with a young associate, Dr. Mills, who was researching childhood blindness for a university study. "We'd like to conduct some follow-up tests," Dr. Harrison explained to Sister Catherine. "We're particularly interested in how children with congenital blindness develop compensatory abilities over time." Micah submitted to the examination with patience, answering questions about his daily activities and demonstrating his familiarity with the farm's layout. The doctors were impressed by his spatial awareness and his ability to identify objects through touch alone. "His development is remarkable," Dr. Mills commented quietly to Sister Catherine. "Most children with his condition don't achieve this level of environmental mastery until much later, if at all." "He's had good teachers," Sister Catherine replied, glancing toward the kitchen, where Lila was helping with lunch preparations. When the examination was complete, Dr. Harrison took Sister Catherine aside. "I want to be very clear about something," he said. "Micah's visual cortex never developed properly. There is no possibility of restored sight through medical intervention. I hope you understand the importance of maintaining realistic expectations. Of course, Doctor, we've never expected miracles." But as Sister Catherine spoke these words, she found herself wondering whether she was being entirely truthful. Over the past week, she had begun to hope for something. Not the restoration of Micah's physical sight, but perhaps something equally valuable. She had begun to hope that this small girl who spoke of healing with such quiet confidence might indeed possess a gift for helping others see the truth about themselves. That afternoon, as she watched Lila and Micah working together in the garden, Sister Catherine found herself praying not for miraculous cures, but for the wisdom to recognize the miracles that were already unfolding before her eyes. October gave way to November, and with it came the kind of challenges that had plagued Sacred Heart Farm for years. Sister Catherine spread the farm's account ledger across the kitchen table one grey morning, the columns of numbers telling a story she had hoped to avoid confronting for a few more months. The figures were stark and unforgiving. Heating costs for the approaching winter, repairs needed before the snows came, medical expenses for the children, and the basic costs of feeding and clothing their small household. It all added up to more than their modest income could cover. The small donations from local churches had dwindled as congregations faced their own financial pressures, and the state support for the children's care barely covered half their actual needs. Sister Margaret found her there an hour later, staring at the ledger with the expression of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "How bad is it?" Sister Margaret asked, settling into the chair across from her. "We have enough to get through December if we're very careful," Sister Catherine replied. "After that," she gestured helplessly at the papers. "The county has been asking us to consider transferring the children to larger facilities. They say it would be more cost-effective." The words hung in the air between them like a physical weight. Both women understood what transferring to larger facilities really meant. Emma would likely be placed in a group home for troubled children, where her selective mutism would be treated as a behavioral problem rather than a response to trauma. Tommy would probably end up in a residential facility that specialized in difficult cases, children who had been through multiple placements and were considered high risk. And Micah would be sent to an institution for disabled children, where his blindness would define his entire experience. "And Lila?" Sister Margaret asked quietly. "Her aunt in Chicago has been calling again. She says she's prepared to take custody immediately." Sister Catherine thought about the conversations she'd had with Lila's aunt, a woman who spoke in practical terms about opportunities and proper education and getting the child away from those superstitious ideas her grandmother filled her head with. The aunt seemed genuinely concerned about Lila's welfare, but she had no understanding of what the child had found at Sacred Heart Farm or what she had brought to it. Through the kitchen window, they could see all 4 children working together, in the garden, harvesting the last of the winter vegetables before the hard frost came. Lila and Micah worked side by side, their heads bent over the task of digging carrots, while Emma and Tommy gathered armloads of dried corn stalks for the compost pile. "Look at them," Sister Margaret said softly. "When was the last time you saw children that age working together without arguing or competing? When was the last time you saw Emma speak as freely as she has this past month?" Sister Catherine had noticed the same thing. The children had formed something rare, a genuine family, bond based on mutual care and understanding, rather than obligation or necessity. Emma's artwork had blossomed under the appreciative attention of her new siblings. Tommy had become protective of both Lila and Micah, taking on the role of big brother with surprising tenderness, and Micah had grown more confident and capable. With each passing day, his world expanding as Lila helped him recognize abilities he hadn't known he possessed. "There has to be something we can do," Sister Catherine said. But her voice lacked conviction. The answer came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson from the local grocery store arrived at the farm with a proposition that surprised both nuns. "I've been hearing stories about what's happening out here," she said, settling her considerable bulk into one of the kitchen chairs. "People are talking about the little girl who has such a way with children, about how much the children here have improved since she arrived." Sister Catherine exchanged a glance with Sister Margaret. They had both noticed increased attention from townspeople over the past few weeks. Curious visitors who claimed to be checking on the children's welfare. Casual questions about Lila's background. Requests to tour the farm that felt more like investigations than social calls. "What kind of stories?" Sister Margaret asked carefully. "Oh, the usual small-town chatter. But some of it's interesting. Dr. Harrison mentioned to his wife that he'd never seen a blind child as capable as young Micah. And Sue Patterson from the school board says Emma's been talking to her mother at church. First time anyone's heard the child speak to an adult outside this house." Mrs. Henderson leaned forward conspiratorially. "What I'm wondering is whether you might be interested in opening your doors a bit wider. There are other children in this county who could benefit from whatever it is you're doing here, and if you had more children, you'd qualify for increased state funding." The suggestion was both tempting and terrifying. More children would indeed mean more financial support, but it would also mean more responsibility, more complexity, and the risk of losing the intimate family atmosphere that had made their current arrangement so successful. "How many more children are we talking about?" Sister Catherine asked. 3 or 4 to start. "There's a brother and sister whose grandmother can't care for them anymore. She's in her 80s, and her health is failing. And there are a couple of other situations where children need stable placements." That evening, Sister Catherine called. A family meeting, something they had never done before, but the current situation seemed to demand it. All 4 children gathered in the living room, their faces serious as they sensed the gravity of the discussion. "We need to talk about some changes that might be coming," Sister Catherine began. "The farm is having financial difficulties, and we may need to make some hard decisions about the future." She explained the situation as gently as possible, but she didn't hide the truth. The children deserved to understand what was at stake. Lila spoke first. "If I went to live with my aunt, would that help with the money problems?" "It might help some," Sister Catherine admitted, "but that's not why we're considering it. Your aunt believes she can provide opportunities for you that we can't." "What kind of opportunities?" Micah asked. "Better schools, music lessons, a chance to live in a real city with museums and libraries." The children absorbed this information in silence. Then Tommy, surprising everyone with his maturity, asked the question that got to the heart of the matter. "But would she love Lila the way we do?" It was Emma who answered, her voice clear and certain. "No, because she doesn't know who Lila really is." Sister Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. In a few simple words, Emma had articulated something profound about the nature of family and belonging. "There might be another option," Sister Catherine continued, and explained Mrs. Henderson's proposal about taking in more children. "Would they be children like us?" Lila asked. "Children who need a place to belong?" "Yes. Children who have been through difficult times and need a stable, loving home." Micah was quiet for a long moment, then said thoughtfully, "If Lila could help me see myself differently, maybe she could help other children too. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do here." "But it would mean changes," Sister Margaret warned. "More work for everyone, less privacy, more complexity." "It would also mean we could stay together," Tommy pointed out. "And maybe we could help more kids feel like they have a real family." As the children discussed the possibilities, Sister Catherine found herself marveling at their wisdom and maturity. They understood instinctively that sometimes the best way to preserve something precious was to share it with others who needed it. That night, as she knelt in the chapel before the silent bell, Sister Catherine prayed for guidance with more urgency than she had felt in years. The decisions they made in the coming weeks would determine not just the future of Sacred Heart Farm, but the fate of 4 children who had found something irreplaceable in each other's company. The decision to expand Sacred Heart Farm's capacity came with a flurry of activity that transformed the quiet rhythm of their days. Within a week of their family meeting, Sister Catherine had contacted the County Social Services Department and begun the process of applying for increased funding and licensing to house additional children. It was during this preparation that Lila made a discovery that would prove crucial to everything that followed. While helping Sister Margaret clean out the storage room that would become a bedroom for new arrivals, she found a small wooden box tucked behind stacks of old linens. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was a folded piece of paper covered with her grandmother's distinctive handwriting. "Sister Margaret," Lila called, her voice trembling with excitement, "I've found something." The paper was a recipe, but not for any remedy they had seen before. At the top, in her grandmother's careful script, were the words, "For healing the spirit when the heart has forgotten how to hope." The instructions were unlike the other healing recipes Lila had inherited. Instead of herbs and salves, this one called for the laying on of hands with pure intention, words of truth spoken in love, and the patient cultivation of trust until the wounded soul remembers its own wholeness. At the bottom of the page, her grandmother had added a note that made Lila's heart race. "This healing works best when practiced in community, where many hearts can help carry the burden of one who suffers. The healer becomes stronger when surrounded by others who share the gift of compassion." "What does it mean?" Sister Margaret asked, reading over Lila's shoulder. "I think," Lila said slowly, "it means I've been thinking about healing too small. Maybe the gift isn't just about helping one person at a time. Maybe it's about creating a place where healing can happen naturally, because everyone is helping everyone else. That afternoon, Lila shared her discovery with Micah during their daily walk around the farm. The November air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the farmhouse chimney and the earthy smell of fallen leaves. "So you think your grandmother meant for you to end up here?" Micah asked, as they settled on their favorite log near the oak grove. "I think she knew I would need to learn things I couldn't learn just from her," Lila replied, "like how to be part of a family and how to help other people without trying to fix everything by myself." Micah was quiet for a moment, his face turned toward the pale November sun. "I've been thinking about something Dr. Harrison said when he examined me last week. He kept asking about my compensatory abilities, all the ways I've learned to do things without sight. He seemed amazed by it, like it was some kind of miracle." "It is a kind of miracle," Lila said, "but that's what I've been thinking about. It's not really a miracle that I can do these things. It's just that I had to learn them because I didn't have another choice. And I had good teachers, Sister Catherine and Sister Margaret, and now you, who helped me figure out how to use what I do have instead of focusing on what I don't have." Lila felt a spark of understanding. "So the real miracle isn't that you can navigate without sight. It's that you found people who could help you discover your own capabilities." "Exactly. And maybe that's what we can do for other children, not fix whatever makes them different, but help them find out what makes them special." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of voices coming from the direction of the farmhouse. Sister Catherine was walking across the yard with a woman Lila didn't recognize, followed by two children who clung to each other's hands with the desperate grip of siblings who had learned that staying together was their only security. "The new children," Micah said, identifying the situation immediately by the tone of the adult voices and the hesitant footsteps on the gravel path. They hurried back to the house, where they found Sister Catherine introducing Emma and Tommy to Sarah and David Martinez, siblings aged 8 and 6, whose grandmother had suffered a stroke and could no longer care for them. Sarah was a serious-looking girl with dark hair and watchful eyes, while David was small for his age and seemed to use his sister as a shield against the world. "Sarah speaks both English and Spanish," Sister Catherine was explaining. "David understands both languages, but has been reluctant to speak much of either since his grandmother's illness." Lila watched the interaction carefully, noting the way Sarah positioned herself slightly in front of her brother, the way David's eyes darted around the room as if cataloguing potential threats or escape routes. The careful politeness that both children maintained while clearly being overwhelmed by another change in their young lives. "Would you like to see your room?" Emma asked quietly, speaking directly to Sarah. It was exactly the right approach. Child to child, practical and without overwhelming enthusiasm. Sarah nodded, and Emma led the way upstairs, followed by the rest of the group. The room Sister Margaret had prepared was simple but welcoming, with 2 beds, a shared dresser, and a window that looked out over the farm's vegetable gardens. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the dresser, Emma's signature welcome, and laid out clean towels and simple toiletries. "It's nice," Sarah said carefully, testing the mattress on one of the beds. David whispered something to his sister in rapid Spanish. Sarah's expression softened as she translated, "He wants to know if we'll have to leave here too, like we had to leave Abuela's house." Sister Catherine knelt down so she was at David's eye level. "We hope you'll stay here for a long time," she said gently. "This is meant to be your home, not just a place to visit." Over the next few days, Lila watched the delicate process of integration with fascination. Sarah was cautious but curious, asking practical questions about chores and routines, while clearly assessing whether this new situation would be safe for her and her brother. David remained largely silent, communicating primarily through whispers to Sarah or through gestures and expressions that his sister interpreted for the adults. It was Micah who made the first real breakthrough. On their third morning at the farm, he approached David while the younger boy was sitting alone on the porch steps, looking lost and overwhelmed. "Want to help me feed the chickens?" Micah asked casually. "I could use someone to carry the feed bucket." David looked up at him with surprise, perhaps because Micah was the first person who had asked him to help with something, rather than asking him to talk about his feelings or adjust to new circumstances. They walked to the chicken coop together, David carrying the bucket while Micah provided a running commentary about each chicken's personality and habits. By the time they returned to the house, David was smiling for the first time since his arrival. "How did you know that would work?" Lila asked Micah later. "He reminded me of myself when I first came here," Micah replied. "Scared and tired of people asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. Sometimes what people need most is just to feel useful." That evening, as the expanded household gathered for dinner, Lila found herself studying the group dynamics with new awareness. 8 people now sat around the kitchen table, 2 nuns, 6 children ranging in age from 6 to 9, representing a complex web of personalities, needs and backgrounds. But something was working. Emma was quietly helping David identify the different foods on his plate, describing each one in both English and the few Spanish words she had picked up from Sarah. Tommy was telling Sarah about the best places to explore on the farm, his natural, protective instincts extending to include the new arrivals. Sister Catherine and Sister Margaret moved efficiently around the kitchen, their decades of experience allowing them to accommodate 2 additional place settings without missing a beat. And in the center of it all, Lila realized, was the principle her grandmother's final recipe had described: the power of community to create conditions where healing could happen naturally, where everyone contributed to everyone else's well-being. As she helped clear the dinner dishes, Lila felt a deep sense of rightness about the direction their lives were taking. They were building something here that was bigger than any individual healing. They were creating a place where children who had been told they were broken could discover that they were whole. December arrived with an early snowfall that blanketed Sacred Heart Farm in pristine white, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical. The children pressed their faces against the windows at breakfast, watching fat flakes drift past the glass while Sister Margaret served pancakes and hot cocoa. It was in the midst of this winter wonderland scene that the letter arrived, delivered by a postal worker who had to trudge through 6 inches of snow to reach their front door. Sister Catherine signed for the certified mail with a sense of foreboding that proved entirely justified. The letterhead read, "Morrison, Patterson and Associates, Family Law," and the formal language that followed changed everything. "Dear Sister Catherine," the letter began, "we represent Ms. Juanita Rodriguez of Chicago, Illinois, who is the maternal aunt and closest living relative of Lila Mae Johnson, currently residing at your facility. Ms. Rodriguez has petitioned the Cook County Family Court for emergency custody of the minor child, citing concerns about her current living situation and educational opportunities." Sister Catherine sank into the kitchen chair, the letter trembling in her hands as she continued. Reading. The legal document outlined Lila's aunt's case in stark, clinical terms: a properly structured home environment, access to quality educational resources, removal from an unstable rural setting, and most damaging of all, protection from potentially harmful religious practices and superstitious beliefs that may be detrimental to the child's psychological development. "What is it?" Sister Margaret asked, noting Sister Catherine's pale complexion. Sister Catherine handed over the letter wordlessly, watching her friend's expression grow increasingly grave as she read. The legal petition painted Sacred Heart Farm as a well-meaning but inadequate facility, and Lila's aunt as a concerned relative trying to rescue a child from circumstances that, while not abusive, were certainly not in the child's best interests. "She's hiring lawyers," Sister Margaret said finally. "This isn't just a family disagreement anymore." The letter continued with information that made the situation even more complex. Lila's aunt had been awarded a promotion at the Chicago accounting firm where she worked, providing her with increased income and stability. She had enrolled Lila in a prestigious private school, secured a spot in an after-school program for gifted children, and arranged for tutoring to help the child overcome any educational deficits resulting from her unconventional upbringing. Most devastating of all, the petition claimed that Lila was being exploited for her perceived supernatural abilities and that her impressionable nature was being manipulated by adults who should know better. The aunt's lawyers had somehow learned about the stories circulating in town about Lila's healing work with Micah and had characterized it as evidence of psychological manipulation. How could they know about that? Sister Catherine asked. But even as she spoke, she remembered the increased attention from townspeople, the casual questions, the requests for tours of the farm. Someone had been gathering information, building a case. The children were still absorbed in watching the snow when Sister Catherine called Lila aside for a private conversation in the chapel. The small sanctuary felt colder than usual, and the silent bell above them seemed to emphasize the gravity of the situation. "Lila, I need to tell you about something important," Sister Catherine began, then explained the contents of the letter as gently as possible. Lila listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly serious as she absorbed the implications. When Sister Catherine finished, the 7-year-old was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the wooden cross above the altar. "She thinks I'm being hurt here," Lila said finally. "She thinks we're not providing you with the opportunities you deserve. But this is where I belong." Lila's voice was firm, but Sister Catherine could hear the fear underneath. "This is where my grandmother wanted me to be." "How can you be sure of that?" Lila reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden angel her grandmother had carved, the one item she carried with her everywhere. "Grandmother told me that when the time came, I would know where I needed to go by the feeling in my heart when I got there. She said home wasn't a place on a map, but a place where your spirit could grow." Sister Catherine felt tears sting her eyes. "And how does your heart feel here?" "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like all the hard things that happened before were just the path leading me here." Lila paused, then looked directly at Sister Catherine. "How long do we have?" "The court hearing is scheduled for next week. Your aunt has requested emergency custody, which means she could take you immediately if the judge agrees with her petition." That evening, Sister Catherine gathered all the children in the living room to explain the situation. She had debated whether to include the newer arrivals in such a difficult conversation, but ultimately decided that honesty was more important than protection from hard truths. The reaction was immediate and intense. Emma began crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her sketchbook. Tommy's expression hardened with anger, while Micah went very still in the way he did when processing overwhelming information. Sarah and David, still adjusting to their new home, looked frightened at the prospect of another disruption. "But Lila belongs here," Emma said, her voice thick with tears. "She's part of our family." "I know, sweetheart," Sister Catherine replied, "but sometimes other adults make decisions that affect children, even when those children would choose differently." "What if we told the judge how much we need her?" Tommy asked. "We're going to try," Sister Margaret assured him. "We're hiring a lawyer of our own to fight for Lila to stay. But we need to be prepared for the possibility that the court might decide differently." Micah spoke for the first time since hearing the news. "Lila, what do you want to happen?" It was a simple question, but it cut to the heart of the matter. Everyone turned to look at Lila, waiting for her response. "I want to stay here with all of you," she said without hesitation. "But I also want my aunt to understand that I'm not being hurt or held back. I want her to see what we have here, what we've built together. How could we show her that? Sarah asked, speaking up for the first time during the conversation. Lila was quiet for a moment, thinking, then her face brightened with an idea. What if we invited her to come see for herself? Not for the court hearing, but just to visit. To meet all of you and see how we live. Sister Catherine considered this. The letter suggests she's already made up her mind about what's best for you. Maybe, but Grandmother always said that people's hearts could change when they saw the truth with their own eyes. Maybe if Aunt Juanita could see that I'm happy and safe and learning important things, she would understand. Over the next few days, the household mobilized around preparing for the court hearing and the possibility of Lila's departure. But they also worked on implementing her suggestion about inviting her aunt for a visit. Sister Catherine placed a careful phone call to Chicago, speaking with Juanita Rodriguez for the first time since the legal proceedings began. The conversation was tense but civil, and eventually Lila's aunt agreed to come to the farm for a day-long visit before the court hearing. I want to see for myself what kind of environment my niece is living in, she said, and I want to meet the people who have been caring for her. Meanwhile, the children threw themselves into preparing for the visit with the intensity of a military campaign. Emma created a portfolio of drawings showing their daily life, pictures of everyone working together, playing together, learning together. Tommy and Micah composed a letter explaining what Lila meant to their family and how much she had helped each of them. Sarah and David, despite being the newest members of the household, insisted on contributing their own testimonials about how welcoming and safe they felt at Sacred Heart Farm. But as the day of the visit approached, Lila found herself struggling with doubts she hadn't experienced since her arrival. What if her aunt was right? What if she really could have better opportunities in Chicago? What if her desire to stay at Sacred Heart Farm was selfish, based on her own need for family rather than what was truly best for her future? The night before her aunt's arrival, Lila lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her grandmother's wooden angel clutched in her palm. She tried to pray for guidance, but for the first time since her grandmother's death, she felt uncertain about what the answer might be. In the room next to hers, she could hear Micah moving restlessly, clearly unable to sleep as well. Through the thin walls, she heard him whisper her name. "Lila, are you awake?" "Yes." "Whatever happens tomorrow, you need to know something. You gave me more than better hearing or improved navigation skills. You helped me understand that I was already whole, just different. That's the most important gift anyone has ever given me." Lila felt tears slide down her cheeks. "You gave me something too," she whispered back. "You helped me understand what home really means." As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lila held on to that truth, knowing that whatever the next day brought, she had found something at Sacred Heart Farm that no court order could take away from her. The understanding that healing and wholeness came not from being perfect, but from being perfectly loved. The morning of Juanita Rodriguez's visit dawned clear and cold, with ice crystals coating every surface and the farm looking like something from a holiday card. The children had been awake since before sunrise, making final preparations with the nervous energy of people who understood that everything they cherished hung in the balance. Emma had arranged her artwork chronologically, creating a visual narrative of her progress from silent, withdrawn child to confident young artist. The transformation was dramatic. Her early drawings were dark and cramped, filled with isolated figures and empty spaces, while her recent work burst with color and connection, showing the farm family engaged in activities that radiated warmth and belonging. Tommy and Micah had spent the previous evening refining their joint letter, with Tommy writing, while Micah provided ideas and emotional insights. The final version was 3 pages long, written in Tommy's careful script, explaining not just what Lila had done for them individually, but how her presence had transformed the entire household. Before Lila came, they had written, "We were, each dealing with our problems alone, even though we lived in the same house. She taught us that we could help each other, and that made all of us stronger. She didn't fix us because we weren't broken. She just helped us see what we could do together." Sarah and David had created their own contribution, a detailed schedule showing how the children's days were structured, complete with educational activities, chores that taught responsibility, and free time that encouraged creativity and exploration. Despite being the newest arrivals, they had thrown themselves into documenting why Sacred Heart Farm represented the best possible environment for children who needed stability and understanding. Sister Catherine and Sister Margaret had prepared their own materials, financial records showing the farm's improved stability since taking in additional children, letters of recommendation from Dr. Harrison and other community members, and documentation of each child's progress in areas ranging from academic achievement to social development. But it was Lila herself who had insisted on the most important preparation of all. She had asked that the day proceed exactly as any other day at Sacred Heart Farm. No special meals, no altered routines, no attempt to present anything other than their authentic daily life. "If Aunt Juanita is going to understand who I really am now, she needs to see how we actually live," Lila had explained, "not some performance we put on to impress her." At precisely 10 o'clock, a sleek black sedan pulled into the farm's gravel driveway, looking as out of place as a spaceship among the practical farm vehicles. Through the kitchen window, the children watched a woman emerge from the driver's seat, tall, impeccably dressed in a wool coat and leather boots that clearly hadn't been chosen with farm visits in mind. Juanita Rodriguez was younger than Sister Catherine had expected, probably in her early 30s, with Lila's same serious, dark eyes and determined jaw. She moved with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to urban environments, her gaze taking in the farm's buildings with the assessing expression of someone conducting an inspection. Sister Catherine met her at the front door, extending a warm greeting that was returned with cautious politeness. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Rodriguez. I know this isn't easy for any of us." "I appreciate you allowing me to visit before the hearing," Juanita replied, stepping into the farmhouse entrance hall. "I want to understand Lila's current situation before making any final decisions." The children had positioned themselves in the living room, not in a formal line, but engaged in their typical afternoon activities. Emma sketching at the coffee table, Tommy and Micah working on a wooden puzzle, Sarah helping David sound out words in a picture book. It was a scene of comfortable domesticity that would have been impossible to stage. Lila emerged from the kitchen, where she had been helping Sister Margaret prepare lunch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. For a moment, aunt and niece simply looked at each other, and Sister Catherine could see the family resemblance clearly. The same intelligent eyes, the same slight tilt of the head when thinking, the same air of quiet determination. "Hello, Aunt Juanita," Lila said formally. "Hello, Lila." Juanita knelt down to her niece's eye level. "You look healthy. Have you been eating well?" "Yes, Mom. Sister Margaret is a very good cook. Would you like to meet everyone?" The introductions were handled with the careful politeness that children reserve for important adult visitors. Each child shook Juanita's hand and answered her questions about their ages, their time at the farm, and their daily activities. But Sister Catherine noticed that Juanita's expression remained neutral, neither disapproving nor impressed, simply evaluating. "Lila has told us so much about you," Sister Catherine said, leading the way to the kitchen where lunch was being prepared. "She speaks of you with great affection." "I've been concerned about her since our grandmother passed," Juanita replied. "Rosa filled Lila's head with a lot of old-fashioned ideas that might not serve her well in the modern world. Such as? Juanita paused, clearly considering how much to reveal. Grandmother believed in folk healing, in supernatural gifts, in things that can't be proven scientifically. I'm worried that Lila is being encouraged to develop these same beliefs instead of focusing on practical skills that will actually help her succeed. Sister Catherine exchanged a glance with Sister Margaret. They had expected this concern, but hearing it stated so directly made clear how deep the philosophical divide really was. Lunch was served family-style around the large kitchen table, with everyone passing dishes and engaging in the kind of comfortable conversation that comes naturally when people know each other well. Juanita observed everything, the way the children helped each other, the affectionate teasing between Tommy and Micah, Emma's quiet but confident participation in the discussion, the seamless way Sarah translated for David when he whispered questions in Spanish. "Tell me about your school situation," Juanita said to Lila during a lull in the conversation. "Are you keeping up with children your age academically?" "Sister Catherine teaches us reading and arithmetic every morning," Lila replied, "and Sister Margaret teaches us science and history in the afternoons. We also learn practical things like cooking and animal care and how to fix things when they break." "But what about advanced subjects, music lessons, art classes, computer skills?" Emma looked up from her plate. "I can show you my art," she offered quietly. What followed was an impromptu tour of Emma's artistic development, with the shy girl explaining her techniques and subjects with growing confidence. Juanita studied the drawings carefully, and Sister Catherine saw surprise flicker across her features as she recognized the sophistication of the work. "This is very good," Juanita admitted. "Who has been teaching you?" "Mostly I teach myself," Emma replied. "But Lila helps me see things differently sometimes. She shows me how to look for the feelings underneath what people are doing." After lunch, Lila took her aunt on a tour of the farm, with the other children trailing behind like a small entourage. Juanita watched Micah navigate the familiar paths with confidence, observed the easy way all the children worked together to complete the afternoon chores, and listened to their explanations of how various systems and responsibilities were organized. It was during the visit to the chicken coop that something shifted. David, who had been largely silent throughout the day, suddenly pointed excitedly at Napoleon the rooster and burst into rapid Spanish, his face animated with delight. "What is he saying?" Juanita asked Sarah. "He says the rooster looks like our abuelo's rooster back home, the one that used to follow him around the yard," Sarah translated, smiling at her brother's enthusiasm. For the first time all day, Juanita's carefully controlled expression softened. "Your grandfather had a pet rooster." David nodded vigorously and continued his explanation in Spanish, with Sarah providing translation. The story that emerged was about a rooster who had appointed himself protector of David's grandfather, following the old man around his small yard and crowing challenges at anyone who came too close. "Abuelo used to say that Napoleon, we called our rooster Napoleon too, was his guardian angel in disguise," Sarah concluded. Juanita was quiet for a moment, watching her niece interact with these children who clearly adored her. "How did you know to name your rooster Napoleon?" "Micah named him," Lila replied. "He said the rooster acted like a little emperor, so he deserved an emperor's name." "And how did you know that David would respond to the rooster story?" Lila considered the question seriously. "I didn't know for sure, but I noticed that he gets excited about things that remind him of home and family. And Micah told me that animals sometimes help people feel connected to good memories." It was then that Juanita began to understand what she was actually observing. These children weren't just living together, they were paying attention to each other, caring for each other's emotional needs, creating an environment where healing could happen naturally. The afternoon continued with demonstrations of the children's various skills and projects. Tommy showed off the wooden toolbox he was building under Sister Margaret's guidance. Micah demonstrated his rope braiding technique and explained how he had learned to identify different types of wood by touch and smell. Sarah and David performed a short skit they had developed to help David practice his English while staying connected to his Spanish heritage. But it was during the evening's quiet time that Juanita finally saw what Lila had been trying to show her all day. The family gathered in the living room after dinner, not for any organized activity, but simply to spend time together. Emma was sketching. Tommy and Micah were working on their wooden puzzle. Sarah was reading to David from a bilingual storybook, and Lila was helping Sister Catherine mend a tear in one of the kitchen curtains. The scene was utterly ordinary and completely extraordinary. 6 children of different ages and backgrounds, each dealing with their own challenges, but functioning as a genuine family unit based on mutual care and understanding. "Tell me something, Lila," Juanita said quietly, settling beside her niece on the couch. "When you first came here, what did you think you were going to accomplish?" Lila set down her needle and thread, considering the question carefully. "I thought I was going to heal Micah's blindness," she said honestly. "I thought that was what Grandmother had prepared me to do. And now I understand that I was meant to learn about a different kind of healing. The kind that happens when people help each other see what they're truly capable of." Juanita looked around the room, at the children engaged in their quiet activities, at the sisters moving efficiently through their evening routines, at the sense of peace and belonging that permeated the entire household. For the first time since her arrival, she began to wonder whether her assumptions about what was best for Lila might need to be reconsidered. The county courthouse in Millbrook was a stern, brick building that had been constructed during an era when government architecture was meant to inspire both respect and intimidation. Sister Catherine climbed the front steps with Lila's small hand clasped firmly in hers, followed by their attorney, a kind-faced woman named Margaret Hayes, who specialized in family law and had donated her services to their cause. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning, but they had arrived early to allow time for final preparations. In the waiting area outside Family Courtroom B, the atmosphere was tense with the weight of impending decisions that would reshape young lives. Juanita Rodriguez sat across the corridor with her legal team, 2 attorneys in expensive suits, who exuded the confident competence of people accustomed to winning. She nodded politely when she saw Sister Catherine and Lila, but the warmth that had begun to develop during her farm visit was overshadowed by the formal setting and the gravity of the legal proceedings. "Remember," Margaret Hayes said quietly, "to Sister Catherine, the judge will want to hear about Lila's educational progress, her emotional stability, and her integration into your household. Be specific about measurable improvements and concrete examples." Sister Catherine nodded, but her attention was focused on Lila, who sat beside her with remarkable composure for a 7-year-old whose future was about to be determined by strangers. The child wore her best dress, a blue outfit that Emma had helped her choose because it brought out the color of her eyes, and carried a small folder containing letters from each of her farm family members. At precisely 9 o'clock, they were called into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Winters, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and a reputation for fairness, took her seat at the bench and reviewed the case file with careful attention. "This hearing concerns the custody of Lila Mae Johnson, age 7, Judge Winters began. "We have before us a petition from Ms. Juanita Rodriguez, the child's maternal aunt, requesting transfer of custody from Sacred Heart Farm, where the child has been residing for approximately 3 months. The proceedings began with testimony from Juanita's attorneys, who presented their case with clinical precision. They outlined Juanita's financial stability, her educational background, her plans for Lila's schooling and extracurricular development. They painted a picture of opportunity and advancement that stood in stark contrast to what they characterized as the farm's limited resources and unconventional approach. Ms. Rodriguez has secured enrollment for Lila at St. Catherine's Academy, one of Chicago's most prestigious private schools, the lead attorney explained. She has arranged for piano lessons, tutoring in advanced mathematics, and participation in a gifted children's program. The child would have access to cultural opportunities, museums, concerts, libraries that simply aren't available in a rural setting. When it came time for cross-examination, Margaret Hayes asked careful questions designed to reveal the potential drawbacks of such an arrangement. Ms. Rodriguez, how many hours per week would you be working at your new position? Approximately 50 to 60 hours, including travel, Juanita admitted. And who would be caring for Lila during those hours? I've arranged for an excellent after-school program and reliable childcare providers, but no family members, no consistent relationship with adults who know her personal history and emotional needs. Juanita hesitated. The caregivers would be professionals trained in child development. Margaret Hayes nodded thoughtfully. And tell me, Ms. Rodriguez, during your visit to Sacred Heart Farm, did you observe any signs that Lila was unhappy? Malnourished, educationally neglected, or emotionally distressed? The question hung in the air as Juanita considered her response. Sister Catherine could see the internal struggle playing out across her features, the tension between her genuine concern for Lila's welfare and her growing recognition that the child was thriving in her current environment. No, Juanita said finally, I observed a child who appeared healthy and content, but I remain concerned about the long-term limitations of her current situation. It was then time for Sacred Heart Farm's defense. Margaret Hayes called Sister Catherine to the witness stand, where she testified about Lila's remarkable adaptation to farm life, her positive influence on the other children, and her consistent academic progress under their homeschool program. In 3 months, Sister Catherine explained, Lila has not only caught up to grade level in all subjects, but has demonstrated exceptional ability in several areas. More importantly, she has helped create an environment where all the children in our care have shown significant improvement in confidence, social skills, and emotional stability. The judge listened carefully, occasionally asking for clarification or specific examples. When Sister Catherine described the changes in Micah's independence and Emma's artistic development, Judge Winters leaned forward with obvious interest. You're suggesting that Lila has had a therapeutic effect on the other children? I'm saying that she has a natural gift for helping others recognize their own capabilities. She doesn't try to fix people. She helps them understand that they aren't broken. The most powerful moment came when Margaret Hayes presented the letters written by each of the farm children. Rather than reading them aloud, she requested permission for the children themselves to address the court, a highly unusual request that Judge Winters granted after careful consideration. Emma was the first to speak, her voice soft but clear. As she stood at the witness table, Lila helped me find my voice, she said simply. Before she came, I couldn't talk to grown-ups because I was too scared, but she showed me that it was safe to share what I was thinking and feeling. She taught me that my drawings could tell stories that help other people understand things better. Tommy followed, his usual wariness replaced by earnest determination. Lila made our family work better. We all had problems before, but we tried to handle them by ourselves. She taught us that we could help each other, and that made everyone stronger. She didn't change who we were, she just helped us be better at being ourselves. But it was Micah's testimony that created the most profound impact. He approached the witness table with the confident stride that had become his trademark, then turned toward Judge Winters with the precise orientation that demonstrated his remarkable spatial awareness. Your Honor, he began, people have been trying to help me with my blindness since I was born. Doctors and specialists and even faith healers have all attempted to restore my sight or teach me to cope with my disability. But Lila was the first person who helped me understand that I wasn't disabled. I was differently abled. Judge Winters leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Can you explain what you mean by that? She taught me to recognize abilities I already had but didn't know how to use effectively. She helped me understand that my other senses could give me information that sighted people often miss. Most importantly, she showed me that my value as a person wasn't determined by what I couldn't do, but by what I could contribute to my family and community. The courtroom was completely silent as Micah continued. Before Lila came to Sacred Heart Farm, I thought of myself as someone who needed to be taken care of. Now I know that I'm someone who can take care of others too. That's not a medical miracle. It's something much more important. It's the miracle of understanding who you really are. When the children finished their testimonies, Judge Winters called for a brief recess. Sister Catherine watched Juanita's face during the break and saw something she hadn't expected: tears. Lila's aunt was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while her attorneys huddled around her, discussing strategy and legal precedents. But when court reconvened, it became clear that something fundamental had shifted in Juanita's perspective. She requested permission to address the court directly, speaking without notes or legal preparation. "Your Honor," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I came here today convinced that I knew what was best for my niece. I believed that providing her with educational opportunities and cultural advantages was the most important gift I could offer. But after spending time at Sacred Heart Farm and listening to these children speak about what Lila means to them, I'm beginning to understand that there are different kinds of opportunities and different definitions of what it means to thrive." Judge Winters nodded encouragingly. "Please continue, Ms. Rodriguez. Lila has found something at Sacred Heart Farm that I'm not sure I can provide in Chicago. A sense of purpose, a community that needs her specific gifts, and the opportunity to develop her natural ability to help others heal and grow. Watching her with those children yesterday, I saw a confidence and maturity that goes far beyond what any private school could teach." Juanita paused, looking directly at Lila for the first time since the hearing began. "I still believe she deserves every educational advantage we can provide, but I also believe she deserves to remain in an environment where she can continue to flourish as the remarkable young person she's already becoming." The silence that followed Juanita's unexpected testimony stretched across the courtroom like a held breath. Judge Winters studied the documents before her, then looked up at the assembled group with the expression of someone weighing decisions that would ripple through multiple lives. "Ms. Rodriguez," the judge said carefully, "are you withdrawing your petition for custody?" "Not exactly, Your Honor." Juanita glanced at her attorneys, who were clearly struggling to adapt to this unexpected development. "I'm asking the court to consider a modified arrangement that might serve Lila's best interests while addressing my concerns about her long-term educational opportunities." Margaret Hayes half rose from her seat. "Your Honor, we haven't been presented with any modified arrangement. Could the court clarify what Ms. Rodriguez is proposing?" Juanita took a deep breath, clearly formulating her thoughts as she spoke. "I would like to request joint custody, an arrangement where Lila continues to live at Sacred Heart Farm during the school year, but spends summers and holidays with me in Chicago. This would allow her to maintain the family relationships and sense of purpose she's found, while also ensuring she has access to advanced educational resources and cultural opportunities." The suggestion caught everyone off guard. Sister Catherine felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. relief that Lila might be able to stay at the farm, but concern about the disruption such an arrangement might cause to the child's sense of stability. Judge Winters turned to Lila, who had been sitting quietly throughout the proceedings, listening to adults discuss her future with the serious attention of someone who understood the gravity of the situation. "Lila," the judge said gently, "you've heard your aunt's proposal. Before I make any decisions, I'd like to hear what you think about this arrangement." Lila stood up slowly, her small frame somehow conveying dignity and determination despite her obvious nervousness. "Your Honor, may I ask my aunt a question first?" "Certainly." Lila turned toward Juanita. "Aunt Juanita, when you visited the farm yesterday, did you understand why I wanted to stay?" Juanita nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think I'm beginning to. You found a place where you can use the gifts your grandmother recognized in you. You found a family that needs what you have to offer. And do you think there might be children in Chicago who need help too? Children who feel lost or broken or different?" The question surprised everyone in the courtroom. Juanita blinked, clearly not having expected this line of thinking from a 7-year-old. Yes, I'm sure there are," she replied. "Then maybe we could work together," Lila said simply. "Maybe I could learn from you about schools and books and city things, and maybe you could learn from me about the kind of healing grandmother taught me. Maybe we could figure out how to help more children, understand that they're already whole." Judge Winters leaned back in her chair, clearly impressed by the maturity of Lila's reasoning. "You're suggesting that this arrangement could benefit not just you, but other children as well?" "Yes, ma'am. Grandmother always said that gifts are meant to be shared, not kept in one place. Maybe I'm supposed to learn how to share what I know with more people." It was then that something remarkable happened. Emma, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery with the other farm children, suddenly stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom. She carried her sketchbook and approached the judge's bench with the careful determination of someone on an important mission. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear despite the formal setting, "may I show you something?" Judge Winters nodded, and Emma opened her sketchbook to a drawing she had completed the night before. It showed Lila standing in the center of a large group of children. Some she recognized from Sacred Heart Farm, others who were clearly imagined figures representing children from different backgrounds and circumstances. "This is what I dreamed about last night," Emma explained. "Lila helping lots of children learn to see themselves the way she helped us see ourselves. Not just at our farm, but everywhere." The drawing was remarkable in its detail and emotional impact. Emma had somehow captured the essence of Lila's gift, not as supernatural healing, but as the ability to help others recognize their own worth and capabilities. The children in the drawing all had different challenges and backgrounds, but they were all reaching toward Lila with expressions of hope and recognition. "She showed me how to draw feelings," Emma continued, "and this is what I feel when I think about what Lila could do if she had more chances to meet different children who need help." Judge Winters studied the drawing carefully, then looked up at the faces surrounding her. Lila's quiet determination, Juanita's growing understanding, Sister Catherine's hopeful anxiety, and the farm children's obvious love for their youngest family member. "This court recognizes that there are circumstances where conventional solutions may not serve a child's best interests," Judge Winters said finally. "In this case, we have a child who has clearly thrived in an unconventional environment, but who may also benefit from exposure to different educational and cultural opportunities." She paused, consulting her notes one final time. "I am prepared to approve a modified custody arrangement, but with specific conditions designed to ensure Lila's welfare and continued development." The courtroom held its collective breath as Judge Winters prepared to announce her decision, a ruling that would determine not just where Lila would live, but how she would be able to develop and share the remarkable gifts her grandmother had recognized and nurtured. 6 months later, the bronze bell in Sacred Heart Farm's chapel rang for the first time in over 2 years, its clear tone carrying across the spring fields like a declaration of renewal and hope. The sound drew everyone from their various activities. Children emerged from the garden, where they had been planting vegetables. Adults paused in their work around the farm buildings, and visitors from town looked up with surprise and delight. Sister. Catherine stood in the chapel doorway, her hand still on the bell rope, watching the faces of the people who had gathered in response to the familiar call. The community that surrounded her had grown in ways she could never have anticipated when a small, determined girl first appeared at their door with a proposition that seemed impossible. The farm now housed 12 children, ranging in age from 5 to 14, each bringing their own challenges and gifts to the collective household. The original 4, Micah, Emma, Tommy, Sarah, and David, had become natural leaders and mentors for the newer arrivals, creating a culture of mutual support that made integration remarkably smooth. Lila moved through the group with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark, checking on each child with the intuitive awareness that allowed her to sense who needed extra attention or encouragement. At 8 years old now, she had grown into her role as both student and teacher, learning advanced subjects during her summers in Chicago, while spending her school years sharing those lessons with the farm community. "Everyone ready for today's celebration?" she asked, and was answered with enthusiastic nods and grins. Today marked the first anniversary of Judge Winter's groundbreaking custody arrangement, a decision that had created a legal precedent for unconventional placements when children's best interests were served by non-traditional circumstances. The arrangement had worked better than anyone had dared hope. Lila spent her academic years at Sacred Heart Farm, participating in an innovative homeschool program that combined traditional subjects with practical life skills and what Sister Catherine had come to call healing arts. The techniques Lila had inherited from her grandmother and continued to develop through experience and intuition. During summers and extended holidays, she lived with Aunt Juanita in Chicago, where she attended special programs for gifted children and explored cultural opportunities that broadened her perspective on the world. But perhaps most importantly, the arrangement had allowed Lila to begin fulfilling Emma's prophetic drawing. Working with Juanita, who had discovered her own passion for child advocacy, Lila had started visiting other institutions and foster homes, sharing her grandmother's wisdom about helping children recognize their inherent worth and capabilities. Micah approached the chapel steps, moving with the assured grace that had become second nature to him. At 9, he was considering a future in music, having discovered a remarkable talent for composition that emerged when he began translating his enhanced sensory experiences into melodies and rhythms. "The new children are settling in well," he reported to Sister Catherine. "Marcus is still shy about the animals, but Sarah's been working with him every day, and little Amy has started talking to Emma about her drawings." Marcus and Amy were the farm's newest residents, siblings who had arrived 3 weeks earlier after their single mother was hospitalized with a chronic illness. Marcus, aged 6, was dealing with severe anxiety following the trauma of separation, while 4-year-old Amy had retreated into almost complete silence. Emma, now 7 and blossoming into a remarkable young artist, had taken Amy under her wing. With the gentle patience of someone who remembered her own journey from silence to expression, her artwork had evolved from simple documentation of farm life to sophisticated pieces that captured emotional truths about healing and growth. Several of her pieces now hung in the offices of social workers and child psychologists throughout the county. Tommy, at 10, had become the farm's unofficial ambassador, the child most likely to greet new arrivals and help them understand the unwritten rules of their unusual household. His protective instincts had found positive expression in mentoring younger children, and he was already talking about a future in social work or teaching. Sister Margaret emerged from the farmhouse kitchen, where she had been supervising lunch, preparations with help from several of the older children. At 73, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her energy seemed renewed by the constant activity and purpose that surrounded her. "Juanita called this morning," she announced to Sister Catherine. "She'll be arriving tomorrow afternoon for the weekend visit. She's bringing materials for the summer program applications. Apparently, Lila's been accepted to 3 different advanced programs. The integration of Juanita into their extended family had been one of the unexpected blessings of the custody arrangement. Initially skeptical of the farm's approach, she had gradually become one of its strongest advocates, using her professional skills to help secure funding and resources that ensured the program's continued growth and stability. She also mentioned that the university study is moving forward, Sister Margaret continued. "Dr. Harrison wants to document our methods for a research paper on alternative approaches to childhood trauma recovery." The academic interest in Sacred Heart Farm's success had been gratifying, but not surprising to those who lived there daily. When children were allowed to heal at their own pace, in an environment that valued their individual gifts while providing stable family connections, remarkable transformations occurred naturally. As the afternoon progressed, the farm buzzed with the quiet activity of a community functioning at its best. Children worked alongside adults on necessary tasks, pursued individual interests with encouragement and support, and gathered spontaneously for conversations and shared projects that strengthened their bonds. Lila found herself standing in the same spot where she had first encountered Micah 6 months earlier, on the front porch steps, looking out over the farm that had become her true home. But now, instead of a desperate proposition about impossible healing, she carried a deeper understanding of what her grandmother had really prepared her to accomplish. "Grandmother," she whispered to the evening air, "I think I finally understand what you meant about healing. It was never about making people different than they are. It was about helping them see that they were already perfect, just as the Creator made them." The wooden angel in her pocket, her grandmother's final gift, seemed to warm against her palm, a gentle reminder that love, once planted, continues to grow in ways that extend far beyond what any single person can imagine or control. As the chapel bell continued to ring out across the fields, calling the community to evening prayers, Lila smiled with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found her true purpose, not in performing miracles, but in helping others discover the miracles that had been within them all along.